Hello, genealogists. It's Craig with Just Genealogy. I'm going to have to get into the habit of once I do a thing, I'm going to have to just recognize that right after I do that thing, I'm going to have to do another thing because it just looks like that's happened. So remember when I did the thing on sailors on the USS Constitution and had to do a thing the next day on Marines on the USS Constitution? Well, today is not much different. Yesterday, I did something on the post office on record group 28. Somebody asked a question and I did a deeper dive, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and found out there was a whole bunch of other stuff I should have talked about the post office that I didn't even know I should have talked about the post office, if you know what I mean. So today we're going to talk about moving the U.S. mail from place to place, record group 28, and a few more places. So yesterday from a subscriber, I got a couple of questions and answers, and distilling it down, this seems to be the question. How do you find records on awarding of mail routes, particularly between 1840 and 1870? My second great-grandfather, Robert A. Wilson, had a stagecoach line and a mail route between Nolensville and Harpeth in Williamson County, Tennessee, between those years. Where do I begin? Well, of course, I'm going to go to the finding aid we talked about yesterday, preliminary inventory 168. I actually don't think I described it as preliminary inventory 168 because it wasn't on the cover. But anyway, this is the preliminary inventory to record group 28, records of the post office department. And in it, you will find records relating to star route service. Now, yesterday when I went through the finding aid, I had no clue whatsoever what a star route was. So I ignored it. Shame on me. Evidently, beginning in 1845, when they began doing, when they modified the bid process for carriers, and by carriers, I mean contractors, people who carried mail from one post office to another, although sometimes they would deliver mail on the way. Anyway, they came out with the concept of clarity, certainty, and security. At least I think that's clarity. I'm really not sure what that word even means. I guess I should have looked it up before I started talking, but take the opportunity to Google that word, define it, and see what it means, because I'm going to do it as soon as I finish this. Postal clerks decided that that was just too many words to have to write all the time, so they shortened the phrase to 3 asterisks. In other words, 3 stars. And over time, they became known as star route contracts. Now, if you'd like to have more information on star routes, if you Google star routes, star-routes.pdf, you will get something from the post office department that tells you all about star routes. Basically, what it will tell you is that the first contractors for the post office rode on horseback. And they were first authorized by the Continental Congress. By 1845, mail transportation costs were pretty much getting out of sight, and the preference for stagecoaches, which had occurred over time, changed to contracts being awarded to the lowest bidder. And from then on, they began to award them to people who rode on horseback, to people who had stagecoaches, whatever the cost, whoever could do it cheaply. So what they were able to do with star routes beginning in 1845 was to reduce the cost from 7.2 cents a mile to 4.5 cents a mile, which was significant. However, through the 1850s, the department continued to favor stagecoaches over horses on certain routes. And in 1852, the Postmaster General instructed contract bidders to state the type of conveyance that they would be using if a higher mode than horseback was intended, noting that stagecoaches were still preferred on some routes. One of the things about these routes was that they were regular. So that made carriers easier targets for thieves. So criminal punishment got rather harsh, and anyone found guilty of robbing carriers could receive 5 to 10 years of hard labor for the first offense and death for the second. That, not to mention the other hazards that some carriers faced in regards to snow, avalanches, ice packs, cliff-hugging roads, seas of mud, and dangerous waters. Also remember that in this time, contractors provided their own equipment. So anyway, that's sort of the gist of how they became known as star routes. The first thing I wanted to look for was see if I could identify this route of Nolensville and Harpeth in Williams County, Tennessee. So the question was 1840 to 1870, but I couldn't find a report of the Postmaster General online for that time period or an annual report for that time period. I was searching for an annual report because every year the Postmaster General will issue an annual report. And I assumed that in those annual reports, there would be information on contracts issued during the year. However, specifically in 1839, the Postmaster Amos Kendall provided a report on contracts for transportation of the mail for the year ending 1 July 1838. So when we look at that, we get a little insight into how the proposal process. And here it says, proposals for carrying the mails of the United States from the 1st of January 1838, except as hereinafter stated, to the 30th of June, 1842, on the following post roads in Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. That means that I should be able to find this route because it's in Tennessee. And down at the bottom of this, it says, see advertisement of 6 June, 1837. So I went out and I was able to find on 6 June, 1837, in the Democrat of Huntsville, Alabama, the Postmaster General asking for contracts for various places. I wasn't able to, this did not list anything in Tennessee, but I would imagine that these articles varied by place. Going back to that postal report, I was able to find Route 3467 from Nashville to Tusculum, Nolensville, Hardeman's Crossroads, Harpeth, Eaglesville, Versailles, Carmel, Unionville, and Chapel Hill to Shelbyville. And I apologize for any of my regional mispronunciations. I don't know if it's Carmel or Carmel or Versailles or however they pronounce it in Kentucky. So here is the route that we're going to be talking about for Robert A. Wilson. And we see down here that these are the bidders for this 1838 bid, which commenced in 1838 and expired in 1842. And the winner of this bid was David Darden. Evidently, David Darden had another route, which I didn't look at, but so I know that Robert A. Wilson did not have the route until possibly after 1842. And these are all the people who bid on it. And Darden had the least expensive bid, and it was accepted in 1837. And you can see this route from Nashville, leave Harpeth, leave Shelbyville. So we have the route. So in looking further, I found a letter from the Postmaster General dated 1843. So we've gone into the, we're now post 42. And in looking at that, there is a different mail route number, but it's still from Nashville by Nolensville, Hardeman's Crossroads, Harpeth, Eaglesville. So it's the same route. And now the contractor who has it is Howard Mercer. And then there's another page in this letter that talks to changes in it, who the bidders are, and the bidders are Ridley, Patton, Maddox, and Mercer. So this is in 1842. Oh, and Lewis Joslin. And that was the best that I could do online looking. But again, there are records that tell us who mail contractors are and what their routes are. So in the process of doing this, I came across publication 119, Sources of Historical Information on Post Offices, Postal Employees, Mail Routes, and Mail Contractors. I also found that you can not only download this PDF, if you just do a search for Post Office Publication 119, you'll be able to get a copy of this. And if I break it out, it's also available in digital form as not as a publication, but as a set of web pages where they'll take you through it. And sometimes, although not often, they'll provide you samples of the material they're talking about. So in this publication, we see mail routes and contractors, and that there's information on mail contracts before 1814. And there are registers beginning in 1814. So what you have to do before 1814 is deal with letters, Hugh Finley's journal, and newspapers. And after 1814, there are contract registers. So where to find those registers? Well, for between 1814 and 1916, there's 622 volumes in Record Group 28, entry number 125. And there's an index to those in entry 124. And none of that information, none of these entries are available online, so you'll have to go to the National Archives to do that. Right after that, in entry 126 is a list of star route mail contractors, 1833 to 1877. So in entry, I would go to entry 126, and they are chronological, and then they are by state, and they're under by name, alphabetical name of the contractor. So that's probably where I would start in order to get access to the other pieces. So between entry 124, 125, and 126, that's going to help me. Now, the other place to look, we talked about this yesterday, was the Official Register of the United States. Some of those are available on Google Books, not all of them. There's a complete run in most government depository libraries. At least that's my experience in every government depository library I've ever visited. And there is a complete run, I believe, in the National Archives, except I don't know where it is. I think it's probably in the library that's contained in with the pension record viewing room, but I don't know that for sure anymore because after all, it's been a couple of years since I've been there. So when I look at the Official Register for the United States for 1859, I find that there is a Robert A. Wilson in Tennessee who has a mail contract. So although I wasn't able to find it in 1840, 1841, 1842, which would probably, those are 4-year contracts, so that would take me to 1846. But I do find him in 1859. I didn't look further than that. The Official Register, there are pieces of it available on Google Books. Other places that I'm going to find information that relate to contracts is going to be in the Library of Congress, NAR, of course. For later stuff, after 1900, it's probably going to be in College Park. And then for employees, we're going to find information in the National Personnel Records Center. But again, most of what we're going to be looking at is going to be either in the National Archives or in the Office of the Historian of the Post Office. There is the Orders of the Postmaster General, which do have some information that relates to contracts according to the finding aid. And this is in Record Group 28, Orders and Journals. It's entry number 1. And it covers the period 1835 to 1853. I was unable to find anything online that came out of that. But according to the post office, these volumes are unindexed, but they are useful to post office historians as a secondary source to verify pre-1880 information found in the record of appointment of postmasters. Now, the other thing we want to deal with is post route maps. And these are going to be available in either the National Archives Cartographic Branch, the National Archives at College Park, or in the Geography and Map Division of the Library of Congress. You may remember yesterday when I was showing you a map, this is one was on the cover of that NGS magazine article back in March of 2007. So I went looking for this map because there was a citation in the magazine that told me where to find it in the Library of Congress. It wasn't really easy to find based on the citation, but I get over that. And so here is that map. But in the process, I learned that it actually was a 2-panel map. So this is the entire map for Virginia and West Virginia, just not Western Virginia and Western West Virginia. And down at the bottom of the slide, you can find the actual URL to go directly to the map. There are several ways that these maps can be identified. They can be identified as star route maps. They can be identified as post road maps. They can be identified as post office maps. So you have to be, and also post route maps. Most of them are known as either post route maps or star route maps that I've encountered so far. Now, other records are going to be found at the Historian of the United States Post Office, and that individual has an email of phistory@usps.gov. I don't know how they can be helpful, but when they published this publication 119, and this came right out of that. So if you have difficulty, maybe they'll be able to help. But I think that most of the information that's going to be helpful to someone who's searching out a postal contractor and their route is going to be found in Record Group 28 in entries 124, 125, and 126. So successfully able to identify Robert A. Wilson as a mail contractor in Tennessee in 1859. Not necessarily successful in demonstrating that what his route was, but we have a route number, so we should be able to locate that at some point. But we do know that the route that the family believes he was the mail contractor for does actually exist, and that it existed for a number of years. So that gets us down the road of being able to locate Robert A. Wilson as a mail contractor in the mid-1800s in Tennessee. So this has been Craig and Just Genealogy, converting people doing genealogy into genealogists day by day. As you can probably tell, I actually look forward to getting questions and people asking me where things can be found and how can they find them. It makes my entire day, and I appreciate people who do that very much. We're almost to 300 subscribers. I appreciate that very much. And the views are starting to come in and the hours are working out very well. I had an interesting conversation with someone last night where somebody came to a friend of mine and said, you know, there's this thing out there called Just Genealogy. You ought to go look at it. And she sadly informed them that she was probably the 4th subscriber. That sort of made my day too. I guess the major reason why I'm doing this is I get my day made so very often. I appreciate you all very much. Look forward to tomorrow. And this is me saying bye.